Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a meteorologist on Long Island, and this is my garden. I've been here just for 3 years, and every year it gets lusher and more tropical looking. I know the limits of this climate because that's what I do for a living, but I want to show you plants that do really well as patio plants during the summertime, and a couple that are tropical and actually do well all year long here on Long Island. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is talk about some of the palm trees that I'm growing in containers. You want a couple of characteristics here. Cold tolerance would be great, but at the very least, you want a palm that can handle some shade because it needs to go inside the house, some low humidity because it needs to go inside the house, and also something that's slow growing or just doesn't get really tall, because ideally you would love to have a palm tree that throws out a lot of new fronds in a single season, but doesn't get super big. So with that, let me start off with a palm tree that has pretty much none of those characteristics, but I just love the color. This is a Bismarkia palm. I got it on sale. That's another pro tip. You want to get your palm trees in the fall up here in New York when they are on sale because it's the end of the season. Look at the incredible, oh my gosh, beautiful silver blue on these fronds. It loves sun, can handle a little bit of shade. And the good news is that this actually does have some cold tolerance, slightly below 30 degrees. I'll usually bring it inside when temperatures get close to freezing or about at freezing, and I'll take it in and out during the winter time. I have seen these palms survive temperatures down to 20 degrees in the south, but we don't live in the south, and our freezes are just a lot more dramatic. I have palm trees kind of just like wrapping around my patio. This one is a Gaussia Princeps. It actually did pretty well inside the house. The only problem is that it's really slow growing. I don't even think it grew a single frond this summer. So let me talk about a palm tree that's also unusual, that's a lot faster growing, so to speak. It's actually not a very fast growing palm by fronds. It's called a Flamethrower Palm. But the reason why it's fast is because even though it only grows one new frond a season, look at how big these fronds are. So every time it grows a new frond, it like doubles in size. But because it's pretty slow growing, it does really well in a container. I got this in 2017, so it's a long time ago, and it's still a fantastic container palm. And oh, by the way, as you can see, the fronds turn red. The new fronds are absolutely amazing and totally worth growing. They're only red for about 2 weeks or so. What's also really cool though is that sometimes they're called watermelon palms because they do develop these really cool specks on the crown shaft, which is the pretty part of a trunk, I call it. This next palm tree is really slow growing. It's called an old man palm, and you'll probably be an old man when it gets big, at least up here in New York. I grew it since 2017 also. This was a palm tree from Tampa. Loves humidity, lots of sunshine, and lots of heat. But it does okay indoors, and it does really well in a container. This is the original container that I've had it in since I lived in Florida, which I haven't lived in Florida since 2019. It has traveled with me everywhere. Some years it grows better than others. This was a pretty good year. It looks like it got maybe 1 or 2 new fronds, and that's about the best that you could ask for with an old man palm, a Coccothrinax, native to Cuba. Okay, so now let's talk about some cold-tolerant palm trees. This one's one of my favorites. It's a Livistona chilenensis. It has these really beautiful glossy green fronds that get really big in shade. You can also grow it in full sun, so very versatile. Survives temperatures down to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, which is ridiculous for such a cheap, easy-to-grow palm tree. It grows pretty fast as far as the rate of new fronds every season, so I've actually seen some people overwinter it as a perennial, because even though the fronds only survive down to 25 degrees, the actual stem, the trunk of the plant, can come back from temperatures down to 20 degrees with dieback, and it recovers really well to dieback. Or you can always just bring it inside the garage like I do because it has a pretty decent amount of cool tolerance. So do lady palms. This is a rhapis palm. I love how formal it looks. It's native to Japan. It can handle a pretty decent amount of cold. I've also seen these go down to 20 degrees. This one has had several freezes in its history. Looks fantastic. And this hardy palm is a Trachycarpus, but not the one that you think. It's a rarer variety called a Windmill Palm. It is not as cold tolerant, but I have kept it out in temperatures below 30 degrees, and it does pretty well. I love just this kind of shape of the leaves. The fronds are really, really pretty, and they kind of have this cool silvery-ish underside. It's a fast-growing palm that I've had as a baby. Back in 2017, this was just a little seedling. Now it's getting pretty big, and it's growing a lot faster now that it's a little closer to adulthood. When it was a seedling, it was kind of slow, but now it's a really easy plant. I do love our native plants, and it's really important to grow native plants, which is why I'm really disappointed that some people don't realize that there are native palm trees to the United States. I lived in Florida for a couple of years, and there was a big anti-palm tree thing down there because people don't want to plant non-natives, and that's understandable. So let me talk to you about hardy palm trees, because the most cold-tolerant palm trees in the world are the ones that are native right to the United States. Starting off with the needle palm. This palm tree gets its name because of the needles that grow along the trunk. Need to do a little bit weeding over here, but like I'm terrified to weed around my needle palm, because if you look really carefully, you'll see these all over here. These are really sharp needles. So that's how it gets its name. It is not your typical palm tree that will produce a big trunk. Instead, it's more of a shrubby kind of palm. This is by far the most cold tolerant palm tree in the world, surviving temperatures below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. I do not protect this. I will say when they're young, they actually are kind of cold sensitive, and I have lost them to cold winters. But what's really special about needle palms is that they are a clumping palm, which is great because most palm trees, when they die, that's it, because they're not a typical tree with multiple branches. They have one grow point. For example, we'll use the Bismarkia palm, because you can see the one bud that's coming up. Do you see that? So that's your main grow point. On most palm trees, when that's dead, it's gone. You're not going to have that issue with needle palms because it's a clumping palm. So even if the mama dies, you still have babies, but it is slow growing. So you definitely don't want it to die every year. That's my needle palm. Let's move over to the Sabal Minor, which is another native palm tree to the southern part of the United States. I love the variability in this palm tree. It's another shrubby palm. It is a cousin of the Sabal palmetto. This one right now is covered in perennials. I have a perennial iris plant called Ming Treasure, which is really tall. It's a really large growing evergreen iris. It complements this plant really nicely, but it's kind of growing all over it right now. So this is a little bit of a weedy spot of the garden, but the Sabal Minor does great. Just like the needle palm, both of these can handle sun or shade, although they do prefer sun and lots of humidity. The Sabal Minor can get quite big over time, but it does not produce a trunk. Although there are some variations of a Sabal Minor that does seem to get a little bit of a trunk over time, but yeah, it's pretty tall, and also a plant that I do not have to cover or protect. I actually do find that Sabal Minors are better for first-time palm tree growers than the needle palm. They just seem to be a little more cold tolerant to me. We're going to cut across my pond now to show you the palm tree that everybody knows and loves when it comes to cold hardy palms, and that is the Windmill Palm. This is the most cold tolerant trunking palm tree. So this one will look like a palm tree when it's an adult. I grew them at my parents' house. Insert video here. Love, right? So that's on Staten Island. I've had that since 2009 growing there, but I have only been in this garden for 2.5 years, so all of my plants are small, that I planted at least, and I just absolutely love how fast this palm tree is growing. Check her out. This was just a seedling when I planted it in 2012, and it is already bigger than my fence. Windmill palms also do really well in sun and shade. This one gets a pretty decent amount of sun, especially during the summer. I have some hardy heady Chiam ginger. This one's called Daniel Weeks. This is a perennial that smells amazing. And I also have a cold tolerant elephant ear called Pink China. That is a perennial. Most elephant ears are not a perennial in zone 7, but this one is. And so yeah, windmill palms are by far the most cold tolerant trunking palm tree, but it does not survive cold winters here. I notice around 10 degrees, they usually start to suffer, although this one did survive 3 degrees without protection because it was really brief the cold. So brief cold spells, it seems to do much better than anything long term. I have seen these die in this climate, but they are really fast growing. With a little bit of protection during a cold winter, you're gonna have a lot of fun with this. I'm gonna show it from another angle because I just love it so much. It's really getting big. I'm actually growing 3 windmill palms, and the one that I showed you earlier is in a pot, but I have another one in the ground in the front yard, and I also have one in the shade back here. This is a brand new needle palm, but I got from a local nursery, so they're really starting to catch on. That's a farfugium, known as a tractor seat plant, and this also does really well in shade, and they both stay green, so everything just looks green and beautiful, and I absolutely adore windmill palms. Sun, shade, whatever you want to give it. Okay, so this is a beautiful example of Trachycarpus wagnerianus, which is now considered just another variety of Trachycarpus fortunei, which is your windmill palm. So windmill palm, and then this more compact form. I love that I have these side by side right now because it's just really easy to compare the two of them. Look how stiff these fronds are. I really, really love this as a container plant, and they survive temperatures down to 15 degrees in a pot without really any major problems. Although I will say I kept this one outside almost all year, and the ones that were in the ground had no problems, but this one had, you can see the new fronds are coming up really small, and now they're starting to grow back normally, but the first new frond was really small and damaged because it was in a container and it was exposed to too much cold. So be careful with your container plants because they definitely do get freeze damage a lot easier, even the windmill palms. But yes, fantastic container plant. This is, oh my gosh, like an amazing palm tree that I can't get enough of. This is a Chamedorea microspadix. It is a relative of the parlor palm, of course, next to my mule palm. Sorry, my chaotic hose is all over the place. So Chamedorea microspadix is by far the easiest one I've ever had to actually reach maturity in a container. Look at all of these seeds. They're just like absolutely loaded with seeds. And they're viable too. I have lots of Chamedorea microspadix seedlings. This plant has seen snow, but if you treat this one kindly, it's gonna look a lot nicer. So I recommend treating this one really kindly because it deserves it. It's also known as a hardy bamboo palm, and you can kind of see why, because it does sort of look a little bit like bamboo. Those trunks are really pretty. Overall, just an amazing, amazing plant that I can't get enough of. Does really well in shade and prefers no sun at all. Ignore the Coccothrinax vines, which are taking over my life right now, while I show you the queen palm. Queen palms are so graceful, kind of weedy in the south, but over here it does just fine. I keep it outside in temperatures down to about 30 degrees or so. So most of the winter it does stay outside. It'll go in the garage. If we have a brief cold spell, I'll bring it in the garage, but otherwise it'll go in the house if it's like a really prolonged cold spell. And it does pretty well outside. Inside is a terror because it has all of these little leaflets on it. So spider mites like to hide in those leaflets, and that will suck all of the life out of those plants. Okay. Real quick, I want to show you my windmill palm that's in the ground. This was actually the biggest windmill palm I had when I planted it, but that's why I like to start windmill palms in particular from a small size. I find a lot of times it's not actually worth growing them from a big plant because they grow so fast from seedling size, but this is just a really beautiful form growing in full sun. Every single windmill palm is so different. This one has pretty stiff leaves and almost like a white underside to the leaves, whereas the one in the backyard that I showed you is a lot kind of like more droopy and graceful. These leaves are really rigid. So every windmill palm is so different. There's so much variability in this species, and that's just the fun of growing them. This is a mule palm. It is a cross between a queen palm and a pindo palm, which is a butia. They're both pretty cold tolerant, but a mule palm is much more cold tolerant than a queen and a lot prettier too. It kind of looks like a coconut palm, although I do have an actual coconut palm, so you can be the judge of that. Honestly though, without question, coconut palms are just the palm tree when it comes to beauty and looks. I mean, you can't beat that. That is just an amazing, amazing plant. And I'm hoping to keep it alive inside the house during the winter. I have had luck in the past. Right now it's just enjoying some Coconut palms are a pain to grow, but this one was really cheap, so I'm giving it a try. I actually did grow a coconut palm for many years inside the house and had a lot of luck. Of course, it was outside during the summertime. Honestly, Chamedorias are the palm species that you want to grow, whether you're looking for a palm that does really well in a container or one that you need for a shady spot, because this is another type of bamboo palm that is more tropical. It does absolutely fantastic in a container for life. This one has died multiple times and it just keeps coming back because it does produce babies from the ground up. So that's really nice. It's not invasive like bamboo. It's just called the bamboo palm because that's what it looks like. This is an Eracea known as a butterfly palm. I don't know why. I guess the fronds kind of are graceful like a butterfly, and that's the only logic I've got for that one. But anyway, it's never really great shade plant, although they're also really common as landscape kind of barriers in the South. So, and when I say the South, I mean tropical parts of Florida. Neither one of these are very cold tolerant. Speaking of shade, how about this guy? This is a Chamedorea, just like the one I showed you earlier, but instead of microspadix, this one's called Metallica. It is not cold tolerant, but it is shade tolerant. This is like an epic house plant, but I do keep it right by the pond, gets full shade all summer long, no sunshine at all, and that's what keeps the leaves really nice and metal looking. And look at all the little seed pods that are trying to form on it. So it's really happy in a container for life. So this is a great container plant, especially if you're looking for a palm tree that grows inside the house that looks really different because the fronds are not divided. So if you notice, like most palm fronds, they have those cute little leaflets on it, but this one is just an undivided, beautiful looking leaf, kind of like a banana almost. This one's not technically a palm tree, but we love it anyway. It's a sago palm, although I say we because I'm not a dog owner. If you do own dogs, cats, anybody or anything that could eat that plant, very toxic. Cycads are more related to pine trees than they are to palm trees. This is a hybrid cycad. You know, hybrids are supposed to have vigor and grow faster, but I kind of noticed that this has a very similar growth rate, although it is definitely more upright, the fronds, and I'm just having a lot of fun growing this one. It's been a good grower. This is a triangle palm, brand new purchase, and I've always wanted this. It was formerly in the Dipsis family, which is just such a beautiful group of palm trees. You can see why it's called a triangle palm. It has this really interesting geometry to the trunk. I love it. All right, and that's about all I've got for now. I hope you had a lot of fun watching. I had a lot of fun making this. It sure feels good to bring the tropics to New York. I've lived in Florida, I've lived in South Carolina, but there's nothing like growing a palm tree where it doesn't belong.